Welcome to another episode of Sipping Saints. Today on the podcast, we'll be talking about navigating change.
Nice.
But before we do that, we're going to talk about what is we sipping.
What is we sipping?
Who's go first? Lauren, what are you sipping?
You should go first. You're
All right, I'm drinking. Today I'm sipping on my favorite drink, water.
It's a lie. Your favorite drink's lemonade.
Ice Mountain. I forget if that's Aldi or if that's CVS brand, but water.
Nice.
That's what I'm sipping on, my favorite drink.
Nice.
Water. Anyway, I'm sipping a good old pour over cup of coffee.
What's the type? Do you know?
This is a special bean.
Special bean.
Is that the brand? That's what it's called, Special Bean?
No, I have no idea what bean it is. My roommate made
Is
it.
that Kent's like special pour over or no?
Oh, this is better.
Oh, he's not here.
Keep that in the podcast. Keep that in the podcast.
Don't edit that
No,
out.
Kent's pour overs are really good.
All right, Abel.
Shout out.
Drinking a good old fashioned iced latte from good old Starbucks.
Got any flavors in there?
No, just iced latte. Yeah.
on ya.
Usually I drink my coffee black. So
Nice.
this is enough flavor.
That's basic.
And I'm Josiah, and I had water, but I thought I'd mix it up, so I grabbed a Kool-Aid Jammers Grape Edition
Yum.
to mix it up.
Yum.
Nice.
But I actually have been drinking a lot of water in this season. Side note, trying to
Hydrate or dihydrate.
feel a
is
lot better
the-
when I'm
is the
drinking
word.
water.
I do too. Yeah.
So navigating change.
Navigating change.
Abel, you just crossed a significant moment yesterday.
I did. Yeah. It's my 1 year anniversary here at New Life. So
Nice.
that's pretty exciting. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have a applause?
Yeah.
But,
Pause button.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, my 1 year anniversary was yesterday. So I came on at New Life last year, August 15th was my first day. It was a Monday. Met up Pastor Danny bright and early at EHP. And so began the treacherous residency. Just kidding, it wasn't treacherous, but it was a great residency. And then that was a huge change because I was originally born here in Chicago and raised in Lyons, Cicero area, but had this weird relationship with Arizona, and like me and my family would just come back and forth several times. And so the latest time I had moved there after Moody and was working at a church out there and was there for about 2.5 years. Felt like the Lord was stirring something new, breaking my heart for a city. I thought it was Phoenix, ended up being Chicago. And I applied at New Life, went through the whole interview process, and that was like 3 months of just an interview process, and then was like, okay, I'm gonna do this move. And my family was like, okay, let me get this straight. You're moving back to Chicago without any family to a part-time residency that has no guarantee of a job after, and then you're gonna work remote with your other job. And I was like, yeah, it's basically, yeah, you hit it. Like that covers it. That's it. That's what I'm doing. So that was like a huge change. That obviously was a huge change in my life. I think I have a interesting point of view when it comes to change. For me, I like change. Like I like shaking things up. I like taking risks. So I actually like really look forward to change and embracing change. So it was never like, it was crazy to do it, but it wasn't, to me, I never saw it as, this is impossible to do. I just saw, I've always seen changes like, especially if I'm confident that the Lord is calling me to do it. I'm like, he's just going to provide, he's going to sustain me, and we're going to do it, and we're going to push forward, and it's going to be okay. So I've always like looked forward to change. I've always had that perspective when it comes to change. Maybe that was ingrained in me from when I was little. My parents moved here from Colombia in the 90s. So they left all their family to start a new life here in Chicago to raise me and my siblings. And so I think they've built in me like resilience and grit because of their stories and what they've gone through, and helped me and my siblings look at change as a really cool thing and exciting thing, and not something that's weighty, but not something that should tear you down by any means. So yeah, it's kind of my perspective on change.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is.
What was the most difficult thing in changing? I mean, moving, stepping into something that you weren't certain about. I mean, you made a pretty big change or adjustment. What was the most difficult thing in that?
I think the most difficult thing in that was I had really enjoyed, my siblings hadn't lived in the same city, all three of us, and probably, it had to be like close to 15 years. So my sister moved out really young, and she moved to Arizona with her husband. And and then they were in Ohio, so they hadn't been in Chicago for years. So it was fun being able to be with my siblings and my nieces and my nephews for those 2 years. Like we saw each other almost weekly. We'd have weekly pool parties or barbecues or whatnot and spend time together. So that was definitely, it like coming out here. And when I moved out here, one of my best friend's parents were super generous and let me stay with them for the first 6 months while I kind of figured out, my living situation. And I was staying in my best friend's old childhood room. So that was really funny. But it was weird because I was just like, man, it's just me in this room. Like, this is all I've got right now. I've got really good friends here, but I've got some family, but not super close. And but I'm like, I just have to figure it out. And I'm like, I felt a little bit of what's the word? Appreciation for what my dad did, because he first came out here by himself, and he was sitting in a hotel room by himself, staying at a hotel right there in Lyons, and he's just like, just got to figure it out. I don't speak English, and just got to look for work and figure this thing out. And so, it's kind of just like it's helped me realize and not look back to what was, but like look forward to what could be. And just sitting in that room, knowing that I wasn't by myself, right? Because I still have my family. I mean, I can call them, I can FaceTime them and whatnot, but knowing that they weren't there and I didn't have like a net to fall back on, it was just, that's a bit scary to know that you just got to keep pushing forward. Just keep pushing forward. Because if you don't, then who is going to do that for you? Like, no one's going to do that for you. You have to have that grit and just keep going. So that was definitely, I think that building of that resilience and that being experience was scary. Yeah. It was difficult.
That's good.
Yeah.
Zach, change could be good or bad. When you think of the last major change or a significant change in your life, what is the change that comes to your mind?
For me, it was a bittersweet change of just transitioning out of one season into another season. Sometimes it's simple as that, just like seasonal, like a season change. I graduated from grad school with my master's degree. I'd been there for 3.5 years. So, but that didn't just mean like, well, one, that meant changing routine, the way my day, like my time was scheduled, even the way my year was scheduled, and those kind of rhythms, but also like saying goodbye to a community that I had. I had a lot of very close, dear friends, even the professors that I had to say goodbye to and figure out like, okay, what does it mean now to figure out a new community, to figure out who am I spending my time with now, that kind of thing. So it was a good thing because it's like, wow, accomplishment, celebration, like all this stuff, but it's also sad because it's like, okay, I'm moving away, leaving this place that I've spent so much time at, and walking into a good season, but still grieving the loss of the past season. So that's the change that's most recent for me that I've still been navigating.
That's good.
Yeah.
How do you know or acknowledge or sense, and the question's open to anybody, that you're in a season of grieving? Because I've heard that my dad, when he transitioned, when he I don't know how long, maybe 6 months or something before he went to Moody, or even before he even knew that was on the table, he told my mom, I'm sensing like grieving in my spirit. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm sensing like a letting go of something, a grieving of something. And it was a little bit very close to right before he got the call from Moody. And I've seen him talk through that several times before there's a big change. Like God starts working in his heart and working through a grieving process. Like he loves the season, but there's a letting go. There's a releasing of a beauty of a season or something, a relationship in some type of way. Have you guys experienced that at all, that grieving?
Yeah, I think I've learned really, and actually one of my professors taught me this. He said in class one day that he said people aren't afraid of change. And we're all like, yes, they are. It's very clear they are. He's like, people aren't afraid of change. They're afraid of loss. And every change has some kind of loss involved in it. Even good changes have loss involved. Sometimes those losses are good, but many times those losses are you're saying goodbye to something that was good, that was beautiful, that brought you joy or made you feel good, like whatever it is. So I think part of that is just like recognizing any change that happens brings loss of some kind. And I think being able to name that and recognize what it is you are losing is extremely valuable to be, in tune with those emotional things, and saying, even something good, for example, like with marriage, people typically think of marriage as this like very good thing. Your wedding day, it's filled with celebration, all this stuff. But not a lot of people talk about the grief that's involved in becoming married. Yes, it's great and amazing, but you're also saying, it's a big transition in your life. You're saying goodbye to like, independence, or living on your own, or having flexibility of being single, like things like that. And it can be a very difficult process. And those moments of grief, realizing like, okay, my time is not just about myself now anymore. Those things can kind of sneak up on you because we're not used to thinking of certain changes as bringing about loss. So I think a really big thing is just recognizing even small changes have loss of some kind. And sometimes those losses are small, so they might not affect you much, but sometimes those losses are big. And you need to recognize that, you go through a move, you're losing a sense of place, you're losing connection with certain people around you. You go through a breakup, like you're losing that sense of togetherness, that sense of being seen by someone, and that like joy you had with that person. Those are the things to truly grieve and to wrestle through. So I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, part of change, right? This loss, this grieving, and it's kind of, sometimes it can hit you unexpectedly, right? Because you're sometimes, even when you're stepping into something good, like you're saying, you step in that you're so excited about the good and so excited about the new season, the new relationship, but then there's an aspect of you, like maybe even hits you. It's like, wow, I'm feeling like a mixed emotions. There's a little bit of a sadness. And I think that can come from when you came from such a good season and you're going into a very different season, or even just another really good season. Like there's still like, I'm excited for this, but there could still be that kind of that sense of grieving that comes from, like what you said, Zach, loss. Yeah. Lauren, what are your thoughts on that? Grieving, loss, change that comes hand in hand with a new season of change.
Well, I'm really not the greatest person to ask this question, because I feel like I don't navigate change very well.
You're exactly who we want to talk to, because I think that's most people, right?
Yeah, I think change is super uncomfortable and it's really messy most often. There's no like perfect way to navigate it or walk through it. And so navigating, I think, is a good word, because you're kind of like just taking things as they come and learning to embrace it. I feel like for me, I personally, and this is something I've really noticed and had other people point out and have helped me realize that this isn't healthy. But when there are changes and there's that grief of, what you're leaving and what you're going into, even sometimes that's really scary. It could be something way harder than what you were just in. And so the thought of that is just like dread. You're like, I am not wanting to do this. And it's really tempting to just like push down your emotion and just be like, whatever, like we'll get over it in a week. It's going to be done and we're going to be all settled. And that's just like not the case. And me and Zach were talking on the car ride here, like even like physical seasons, like all have some sort of loss to go into the next season. Right. And I think it's so cool that like God, even to kind of exemplify change, he had seasons. Like if we were just always in summer, like I don't think we'd survive. If we were always in winter, we would not survive for sure. I feel like there's little hints that change is good, and like God created us for that as well. But yeah, I definitely haven't navigated change super well, and I tend to like shove down the emotion or the grief of what I'm losing or what I'm saying goodbye to. Rather than like dealing with it and just letting yourself be sad. Me and my sister bought a condo in March, and that was probably the last biggest change. And to say goodbye to, living with my parents, people that I love, we've created like good adult relationships and friendship. And then there's other side other side of you that's like, I am so ready. Like, get me out of here. And they're also like, get him out of here.
Wait, is that get out of the parents' house, or is that get out of like
Yeah, get out
the
of the
condo with
parents' house.
Audrey? Like,
No,
get on Zillow today. Next
Go find
month.
something.
No. With the parents, the older you get, I think the harder it is. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. We can talk about that another time.
Dealing with parents.
Yeah. But I think that was a bittersweet thing. Like, you're saying goodbye. This is going to be very different, and it's going to change the dynamic of our relationship. But I'm also excited because there's a lot more creative freedom and like space and, just you being an adult. So I think my temptation was just to be like, I'm not sad leaving my parents, but then also it's okay to acknowledge those things. So I wouldn't say I'm the best at navigating change, but I do try my hardest to embrace the emotions that come with different seasons, I'd say.
I could definitely resonate with what you said. You said pushing down the feelings of grief and sadness just to keep pushing forward. I definitely do that. Like, I'm just like, I don't got time to be worried about everything that could go wrong or being sad about this. Like, this is what I know God is leading me, so I'm just gonna go through it. And that's not necessarily probably the healthiest approach either. But
Can you talk through? Do you have an example of something you can?
yeah, like even
Like, how do you push down? What does that look like for you?
I think what it looks like for me is just like not acknowledging those feelings. Like, I'm just not going to give any attention to that feeling of grief or that feeling of sadness. Like, what you hear the saying bittersweet, right? Something's bittersweet, change is bittersweet, right? Because it's the bitterness of loss, but the sweetness of whatever you're going to gain or what's next or not knowing what's next. But I really just lean on that sweet part and ignore that bitter part. And like, even I think as I was transitioning out of Phoenix in the church there, like, it was bittersweet. But I think what happens if I push down those feelings of bitterness or like the sad feelings, the feelings of grief, you can tend to, I think wow, I have something in my throat.
Getting emotional. Get some water. Get some water.
There
Tissue.
we
Water
go.
and tissue.
I'm good now. I think what happened unintentionally is that I didn't allow the people who were around me to like almost grieve as well, because I wasn't allowing myself to feel the sadness. So almost like I was kind of unplugging myself too quickly and like drawing out from the situation too quickly. Whereas the people who I was leaving were really experiencing the grief, right? And were really like heartbroken. And I was too, but like I said, like I was just not acknowledging that. I was more so looking forward to what was to come. So yeah, I think just suppressing, looking away, not acknowledging, thinking too much about like the sweetness side of it rather than the bitterness side of it can lead to like pushing down that process of grieving. And it's like, okay, if I push it down now, it's probably going to come back eventually, right? And it may come back maybe unhealthy, right? Or I don't know. I feel like I'm past that part of grieving, but I can see it in the future to where if I don't really acknowledge that process of bitterness or that process of sadness or that process of grieving the loss, then I myself am suppressing, but I'm also not allowing people around me to walk that with me as well.
Yeah.
So
Some of the biggest change that can happen in our life can definitely be people change, right? Somebody that was in your life that navigates out of your life, somebody that was in your life that is no longer in your life or is not in your life in the same way. One of the, I heard this illustration or example was given, was super helpful for me. And this guy was talking about this illustration of a train. He said, life is, like a train, and you have people that get on and at certain stops, and then they get off at other stops. And he kind of finished by saying, and there's certain people that at the end that are going to be there all the way to the end. Your spouse, maybe your family, super close, but there's very limited people that are going to be with you for the entire journey.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And I go back to that picture all the time because it really helps me accept that change is just a part of life.
yeah.
And that's difficult, but it's helpful if we can accept it, because then when it comes, we have a framework like, this is how life's supposed to be. This is how it's supposed to happen. Change, whether we like it or we don't, this is just part of the journey. This is part of the process. This is part of it. But letting go of that or accepting change, especially when we don't want to let go of what is maybe naturally happening or let go of something that's really good, I think is something that people really struggle with in this idea of navigating change. So talk to me about that and your guys' experience, like embracing that change is part of life, but also what has your experience been with something that it's like you can feel it, your hands start to prying up, like the change is happening, but you don't want to release?
That's good.
I feel like every time I say this, Lauren gives me like a look that like she's like, oh, I got a story, but I don't want to share this story.
No, it's just so relatable. I think I was kind of waiting for like a specific memory to pop in my head. None is really coming to mind. I don't know if that's me just trying to suppress it. But it's just, yeah, it's difficult. If anyone else would like to share, they can right now because I'm still.
Well, I was thinking too, change, like back to the train illustration, real quickly, that change seems to be such a, not just a part of like life, but just like the DNA of life. Like, I mean, everything in our life is constantly changing. Like even like take our birth to growing up to becoming old and to dying. Like that process is like we're always changing. The seasons that you mentioned is changing, right? This world is changing, right? I one of my favorite books in the Bible, Ecclesiastes, and I love it because so much of it is like the season, right? Enjoying the season that's in front of you, right? And being content in the season that's in front of you, and that everything has a time and a place, and there's a moment for everything, right? And to me, that book really helped me shape my perspective on change and embracing change and understanding that change is a good thing, right? Because every season has its moment. Every season has its time. There's a time and a place for everything. And so enjoying, like being okay with that has really allowed me to enjoy change, and also learning how to be content as well. Like learning how to be content in this season. So, because I know that this isn't forever, that this isn't going to last a lifetime. And so I'm going to be content in this season, and I'm going to be content in the next season, because I know that change is inevitable. And like the train analogy, right? There's going to be people that stay on the train, people that get off the train, and you're going to keep going. And very few people are going to remain to the very end. But yeah, I think like navigating change and learning how to do it well goes hand in hand with learning how to be content in the moment, in the season that you're in. Because if you can truly, I really believe you could truly be content in the season that you're in, then when the next season comes and you're going through that change from season to season, it'll be maybe not easier, but at least you'll have some perspective and understanding to when it's happening. So
It's good.
yeah.
Thoughts on guys on the train analogy, or just the idea of embracing change, or when it's really difficult to let go of something, you don't want to embrace that new season of change that's upon you. Like, I'm just going to keep, my mentality one way.
I do kind of have a story now that
It's come up from the suppression.
I'm like, okay, Lauren, just let it out. No, I think when I transitioned from Australia back home after missions,
big
that was
change.
like all of my 20s, pretty much. And I was transitioning during COVID. And so I was like at a friend's house in Australia for 3 months, just studying the Bible and watching TV and just hanging out in the hammock in the backyard, gardening, like doing whatever to kind of stay sane. And like, I think during those 3 months, similar to how you said that your dad felt, there was like that something deep down. There's no way to describe it. There's something deep down that started to be like, let's start turning, like start turning the soil again. Like we got to start planting new things. And I knew somehow deep down that when I got home, it would be really sweet to be with family again, to be reconnected, but there would be some really hard stuff. And when I was like feeling these things, I remember just feeling
Really hard stuff is in coming back hard stuff,
just
or
transition. Like
Yeah, just the whole
you
thing.
uproot and then you plant. And I know that you probably have felt that coming from Arizona. Like your whole life, everything you know is now going to change and you have to rebuild. And that's like really scary because it is not in your control. Which comes to my main point is that I hate change because you can't control it. And I like having things neat and orderly. I think that being in control of certain things in your life is healthy, but having this need to control everything actually damages a lot of, if you try and control a relationship, there will be a lot of damage there. If you try and control situations and discipleship, there's going to be damage there. Like control is the opposite. You can't have love and control. Like they can't be together. And so I knew that I couldn't control things coming back. I can't control who I build relationship with. I can just pursue and try and build something, but whether it was reciprocated is not in my control. So I was like really kind of scared coming back of what would things be like. And with COVID, people's mentalities are in a very different place. No one was super healthy. And when I came back, it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I remember one morning just waking up and like just putting on my headphones and I was just like worshiping because I was like, I literally like have nothing, like nothing here. And yeah, that was like, sorry. That was really hard. And I remember feeling like, I don't want to feel these things because what if I can't get out of them? Like, what if I can't pull myself out of this, like, sadness or feeling like things were just never going to change? That, like, hopeless sort of feeling. And so that's why I tend to avoid those hard emotions with change is because that question, like, what if I can't pull myself out? And then I'm just, like, sad forever. And I think what I learned, the key lesson that I learned and I saw continuously with God in my relationship with him is that he will never leave you in like this place of transition. He'll always like gracefully carry you in a place of change. He knows what that's like. And I think he that whole idea that you're talking about, like people grieving with you and being able to ask you questions. And I remember having to tell my family, like, could you like ask me questions about Australia and like my life there because like I don't want to forget that. And yeah, I felt like God's grace really carried me. Which gives me hope for big transitions now. And of course there's those things that you can't change, like relationships. You can't. Yeah. When someone chooses to not engage the same way that you are, you can't control that. But again, like God will graciously carry you through it and he'll provide what you need and what you're looking for. I think if you believe that he actually can do that. Sorry, that got really deep. But
no, that's good. That was really good.
Yeah.
That was really good. And Lauren, it makes me think as you're saying that, I think kind of to both of you guys are saying, like in suppressing it, sometimes in transitioning quick and trying to suppress it, you don't allow yourself to feel the emotions and you just pass through that. And I think sometimes when we really, I think it's part of the process, but it also makes it more difficult is if you don't allow your mind to just jump into what's next and you actually think about how this season, this point in time right here, right now, may never be again. Like that's a difficult thing.
Yeah.
When my dad transitioned, one of the things that I remember feeling like really sad when because I was living at my house at that time. I was working with my dad very closely here at the church at Midway. And when all of this transition came for him to go to Moody, I remember we'd go together to the office, then we'd be done, then we'd be working out together. And like, we're having so much time. And it was a short window season there where we had that, where I was like, we're working together, we're working out together, we're eating. It was like a very, very, very close relationship. And I remember sitting in the car after a workout and we kind of talked about it and just feeling this weird sense of grief that this season that is so beautiful and I love so much is never going to be like this again. Like this is the end of this. And I think that's part of what the grieving is, the end of something beautiful. And what was coming is exciting and it's what was meant to be, but it's letting go of that beautiful thing and saying, like, it's kind of like when a good movie ends. Sometimes you feel like that, or a show, you're like, it's over now.
Yeah.
You ever felt that? Like you watch a really good show, you're like, it's
Dang
over.
it. Yeah.
Like there's not another episode. And then when you go through that in the life, when it's a person or a season or a job or a place that you're at, like that is a difficult thing to navigate through.
Yeah. But if we had just one like consecutive, really, really good
Yeah.
season forever and ever, I think we would just take it for granted.
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't learn how to like be in the moment and really enjoy seasons, really like pouring out all that we are to those people within that season and giving, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one thing I feel like is so key with change is we're just so focused on like what's next. And I think we miss out on so much, like so many good relationships, lifelong friendships that could happen, like just things that could happen in the season that you're in. So I think just acknowledging like, man, I could really give a lot and I could receive a lot in this season, whether it be really hard or really good.
That's good.
But it's going to end.
Yeah.
And like, how do I live now within, you know, fully within this season?
Yeah. And if like you said, if you were to stay in one season the whole time, right? If we were to stay in season one of our lives the whole time, then like you wouldn't grow as a person. Like, and I think that's what I look forward to so much in change as we're talking about it. Why I look forward to new things, and because I know that's going to push me to grow as a person, to grow closer to Jesus, to grow in my faith, to grow as a person, to grow in maturity. Like it's going to, if you allow it to, right? The opportunity will be there to grow. You can either face it and grow, or you can, stay stagnant. And so for me, when I think about change, I'm looking at like just like the opportunities to grow and to mature in areas that I need to mature in, or whatever the case may be. And if you just stay in a consistent season and you become stagnant, then you're almost robbing yourself of what, because if you're too scared to change and you're too afraid of what you might lose, then you almost rob yourself of the potential of what could be in the future, what could be in this next season.
It's good. And I think, fear can be about what you can lose or what you don't know too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk, Lauren, a little bit about your big transition. I mean, because we're at your story, we're in your life a little bit. Talk to us about that big change from, it was Australia, right? From Australia moving. What were some of the fears at that point? And kind of now you're beyond that, you're past that. But what were some of those fears? And how do you look at those fears now, having lived out that life, after those fears?
One of them was not knowing my family as an adult, which sounds weird, but
good.
when you leave at 20 and you come back at 27, you're like, that's like 6 or 7 years of not really knowing and not living life alongside them. And so people change obviously over time. And I was really unsure of like where they were at. And I knew like, Audrey put her on blast. But we had a really rough start because she wasn't in the best of places. And I was just so like, coming from this really good, vibrant, fruitful community where you're just always with these people that love God and you're just like, great. And then you come out of that and you're like, hello, in the desert alone. And it's just you and the Lord, and you're not really sure like who your community is, and you have to literally start from ground zero. And so my fear in that was, could I actually make community? Could I have it here? Could I have that sort of rich, vibrant, passionate, Jesus-loving community in Chicago? Could I have that? And I remember praying and asking God, like, I really need friends. Like, I just want friends. Like, please just send anyone. I don't care if they're 60. Like, I will be their friend. And he did, I think, slowly but surely. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't like someone just showed up and rang my doorbell and was like, let's be friends. It was a lot of heartache and tears. And I think the seeds that I, sowed during that time are fruitful now, but it took a very long time to have fruitful community with my family and with friends as well. think those were probably like two things that I was fearful of, and also unsure. Like I didn't have my next step. I didn't know where I was going to work. But I had this. I knew deep down I was like I'm made for ministry. I don't know how that looks, and that could look like so many different things. That could look like working in a lawyer's office. You know, like it's ministry anywhere you go.
Yep.
But I knew that I was like called to the church, just capital C, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna wait, and I just waited, and then suddenly I was like, you know what, I should apply for a job, and I felt like the Holy Spirit was just so gently like, just wait, just a little longer, and then I, got a job offer working for my parents' church, and I was like, oh, working with you guys, and that in itself was a journey for both of us, but it was also really beautiful to see how the relationship that we've built through just, I think if I had gone ahead and worked somewhere else, I don't know where I'd be right now. And so I think just listening to the Holy Spirit and being like, you do care about my future and you have something for me. And so I'm just going to like not try and control everything. And I'm just going to listen and be obedient. It's that simple, but it's that hard. So I think that would be my answer.
It's good. Zach, she kind of mentioned the danger of change as well. That, in her story, the life was set, the community was set, things were going really well. It was healthy. She had her rhythms and routines. And when you have significant change in your life, some of those routines and rhythms are totally like taken away or broken down, and you have to rebuild in this new season. Talk about your experience with that, rebuilding in this new season, rebuilding health in this new season, rituals, routines, relationships. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's especially, we've been talking this whole time about how difficult change is, but so I don't have to go back into that. I'm reminded though, I just want to share real quick. I'm reminded, as like we're all sharing our stories, it's a lot about moving, like physically.
Yeah.
And back when I moved from California to Chicago, it was very scary. It's the first time I ever moved away from my family and away from my friends and everything I knew and loved, all that stuff. What comforted me through that was the story of Abraham, and how at the beginning of that story, God came to him and said, "Go from your father's house, from the land of your family, from everything you've known, to the land that I will show you."
Yeah.
And he gives him a promise: "I will bless you. I will make you into a great nation." But he says, "Go to this place. I will show you." He doesn't even tell him where it is yet. Yeah. And Abram has to set out. By faith. But the interesting the interesting part of that story that gave me a lot of comfort is Abram, like he went to the land of Canaan. He's setting up a tent, whatever. He's like in the midst of it. And then God comes to him and says, "Hey, Abraham, this land that you are in, look to the north, the south, the east, and the west. This is the land that I will give to you and your descendants." The thing is, Abram was like, if you look on a map and see where he's at in that story, he's in the dead center of the land, which means he had been in the land for so long before he got to the point where God said, "This is the place where that's going to be your home."
That's good.
So Abram, without even realizing it, was in the place God was leading him to, even before it was clear to him that that's where he needed to be.
Yeah.
But all because he was like following, the leading of the Lord and trusting in the change that is inevitable in life. Yeah. Who is constant in that God is. And so you can like hold tight to that and let him, provide that consistency that you may be lacking with the change.
That's good.
So that was comforting to me as I was going into a big unknown.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, your unknown might be different. It might not be moving from one place to another. It might be going into a school program, or it might be losing someone that you love dearly, whether to a change in life or, loss of life. But there's big unknowns, scary things, difficult things that happen with that. Like God is the constant that will, provide that foundation and consistency. So I think that's part of the thing with, establishing what does life look like now, is saying, okay, what is the foundation that your life is built on? Is it built on your ability to navigate change? Because that will change with the seasons, but I think the foundation should be set where we know it won't be shifting around constantly. And that's in God's like promise to provide for you, to be with you, to give you new life. God is all about like new things and bringing about change in your life and growth. But I think once I navigated change, you know, from California to Chicago, or even from out of, like I said, my master's program out of it, is figuring out what does life look like now. And I'm like a dead record, a broken record.
Dead record.
That's a dead
A
record
broken
right there.
record on the podcast, right? I constantly, in past episodes, I constantly go back to community because I think that's so important. You guys have mentioned that too.
Yeah.
Like, what does your community look like in this new season? Sometimes that is the change, going into a new community, but like, you cannot face change alone. There might be seasons where you feel alone, but we're not meant to be alone. We're meant for life together, which is something we've been talking about as a church family this season. But
Shameless plug.
yeah, go check out the Sunday Message at your closest New Life location. But you know, this is like, change is so different when you're trying to figure things out alone, or when you have people to hold you up.
Yeah.
When you do not have the strength to take another step, like, you need those people to just like be that support for you, or even to like knock some sense into you and say, hey, something needs to change. Like, you're in a toxic place, you're in an unhealthy relationship, you need to get out of that. You know, it's like community is just so valuable. And on top, when you know that your foundation is the Lord, and then on top of that you have the body of Christ and your family members and your friends, then that's already a solid foundation to where then you are able to, as an individual, say, how do I bring some consistency and growth into my life through routines and rhythms, and figuring out, you know, your day to day and those kind of like disciplines and things like that. But I think it starts with that foundation of, do you have support to then be able to say, I no longer have this like routine of going to class every day, so how do I make sure I'm still growing in my own life? Or I don't have that relationship, to that person to reach out to when I'm lonely and say like, hey, this and this and this, you know, I need this right now. Where will you go when you feel that loneliness? Where you go when you feel that brokenness? So I think once you have the foundation, then you can start asking those questions of, what does my routine look like? Yeah.
Zach, when you were talking about when you dropped that just total bomb right there of Abraham being in the middle of the desert, got my mind going. But we're jumping into a church in September. We're jumping into the Exodus series. And so I've been studying Exodus. This morning I was listening to Exodus, and Exodus jumps like right into Moses' story. I mean, there's no buildup. It's like, you know, about to kill him. And it's just like, I mean, like right in. I mean, chapter 1, Pharaoh's like, they're all dead. All the boys are dead. And so, I mean, it jumps in, but chapter 3, 4 is so Moses moves, it kills an Egyptian and runs away. Pharaoh's out to kill him, runs to the desert, right? He has some connections and relationships there. He establishes over years his new he gets married, family. I mean, that's a major change from a prince in the most powerful country in the world to now living in the desert, right? Go watch Prince of Egypt. Sick movie.
Sick movie.
Great movie.
But then here's what's so, I mean, 2 chapters in the Bible are talking about a major change, right? And Moses is living his life, doing his thing, and he encounters God. He encounters God in this burning bush. And one of the things that's cool about this, the language it uses, he says, he was drawn to the bush was on fire, but it wasn't burning.
Yeah.
So much there. Yeah. So much there. You know, go through the trials, go through the storms. Everything can be burnt. Everything can be on fire around you, and you cannot be burning when God's with you, right? Not crumbling, not falling apart. But so God tells him, Moses, I'm sending you back to where you came from. I'm bringing a huge change in your life. I'm calling you to something. I'm calling this change into your life. This is going to change your life forever. You need to go lead my people to freedom. And Moses has this, he's not like, yes, God, I'm going to go take it on. I can't wait. This is amazing change in my life. He is absolutely terrified, absolutely afraid. Yeah. He's trying to give, like, let it be someone, give it to someone else. Why me? And you can see how, and this is why I'm going to go back to this fear point. You see that the fear actually is not allowing him to step into what God has actually called him to. I mean, God is clearly saying, Moses, you're called to do this. And Moses is saying, I'm not good at speaking. I shouldn't be the guy. Like, he's focusing. Yeah. Then he's like, hey, what about someone else? He's trying to say, hey, maybe that's for someone else. I'm not ready to step into this. What you have for me, God, I can't take that change on. Right. And I think so many people wrestle with that. And sometimes it's a change that gets thrust upon them. Sometimes it's a change from God. It's God calling them into a new season, God calling them into a change. And they have so much fear about who they are and insecurity that they're afraid to step into that because I'm not enough. Speak to that. So listening this morning, that's what I'm listening to this morning. And I'll drop one more nugget in for you guys to chew on, is that God actually has the grace to say, I'm going to send Aaron with you, and like Aaron will help carry the load.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Moses.
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot there. I've been reading through the Old Testament. I'm in Numbers.
That's
And
what really
so
gets
a little
me
bit
pumped up.
A little bit further into the story. So the thing is, the Israelites are enslaved, right, in
Yeah.
Egypt
Yeah.
for 400
400
years. They're enslaved to one of the greatest nations on the earth at that time, and God is going to bring about a change in them, for them, bringing them out of slavery into freedom, and into like relationship with Himself, and so He does that. He does all these miraculous, amazing things through Moses, through all this stuff. And they're in the wilderness traveling to the next place.
Yeah.
And then that's where we see everything falls apart. The people, after seeing everything that God has done through, a random guy like Moses, through these miraculous things, they are constantly like, oh man, there's this challenge that comes up in the wilderness, right? Oh, we don't have water. Oh man, we should go back to Egypt. It's better there. Like we had to work, but at least they gave us water.
It literally doesn't take long for them to get
Yeah.
there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like 2 chapters they're
How
out
did
or
you
something
take
like
us
that,
out
and
of
they're like,
Egypt?
"Bring us back,
Yeah,
bring us back."
The amazing thing is, so it's like the whole Red Sea thing. God parts the sea.
Yeah.
They travel through. It closes over the Egyptians, strongest army in the world at the time. All right, cool. This nation of slaves is freed. Chapter 15, that's Exodus 14. Exodus 15, they sing the song and like response, like, thank you, Lord, for doing this. Chapter 15, they come to this place. The water it's bitter, and so they can't drink it. And they're like, oh no, that is literally the next chapter, where they say, we can't drink this water, Lord. You brought us out here to die. Let's go back to Egypt. And it's like, it's wild because they literally just saw this guy meaning the Lord. They literally just saw the Lord part a sea,
Yeah.
and they walk through it, and then they come like the God of the waters.
Yeah.
They saw Him in action, and they see this water that they can't drink, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna die now." And God is like, "Chill, Moses, go through a tree into the water; it'll turn sweet." But
Chill.
I'm saying all that to like we're so afraid of the future, of what God of what we're going into. When things pop up that seem really difficult, we go into this the spiral. And I think what often happens is we long for what we had before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes those were good things that we left behind, right? Like our family, community, certain friendships.
Yeah.
We long for that to be the same. And sometimes we long for those toxic things that made us feel good, at least.
Yeah.
Or made us feel secure. But the things that the Israelites failed to remember, the things that we often fail to realize, is that God has, done so much to bring us through so many things in the past, right? Like we're still standing today. We've gone through so many change, so much loss, difficult childhoods, whatever it may be. Plus we have all these stories in scripture of God like just constantly bringing people into the unknown, but into good things. Like God is a God who brings people into good things. But we fail to like remember that. And I think that's a big source of our insecurity, a big source of our fear, a big source. Moses was afraid.
Yep.
I'm gonna go back. They're gonna try to kill me.
Yeah.
And God reminds him, like, I'm the God of your ancestors, the ones who brought them through so much. Do you remember those stories? So I think so I know that was a long time.
Can I build one more thought on yours real quick?
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
I geek out one more minute on the Bible? All right, here we go.
No,
So
you
building
cannot.
what Zach says, it's so true. So many people will go back to an old season when it's tough. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah.
It's not when things are when they just walked out and they're victorious. No one's like, let's go back.
Yeah.
It's when things get tough that we start looking back and saying, maybe it would just be better just to go back to that.
Yeah, what if?
What if? And here's what God actually builds something into the people's lifestyle to remind them yearly about not going back. And I just studied this recently, and I was like blew my mind. So God tells them the Passover, right? He said, I want you to celebrate this Passover meal for generation to generation. And he even tells Moses, he's like, your children are going to ask about it. They're not going to remember. They're not going to really know the significance. And I want you to help them understand the significance. So when they eat the Passover meal, they eat the lamb, they eat the bread, and they eat bitter herbs. Why is that? Because why would they have to eat something disgusting, bitter? Well, every single year, God wanted them to eat it so that they could remember.
Yeah.
When they're kids, think about it. They're around the table, they're giving these bitter herbs around the table. They're eating it. Dad, this is gross. This is nasty. Dad, why do we have to eat this? And it's a reminder we're eating this because I want you to remind what we came from. We need to be reminded yearly that what we came from is not better than what we're going to. Like we need to be reminded that was bitter. That was not good. And in those difficult moments in the new season when you're really feeling stretched, we all get tempted to say, maybe it's better to just go back to what I had.
Right. Yeah. It's true.
We should add bitter herbs to communion every time.
Let's do it. That's true. It's just a reality that we oftentimes get drawn back to the old, and specifically, if God has called you forward, then you're not supposed to look back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't become Saul.
Yeah, I get stuck a lot in the good old days. You know, so it's not necessarily the bad things. It's the like, you know, oh man, I remember when I used to just like worship with my, you know, my community back then, and I'm constantly like chasing that feeling, you know, or I remember when I had this and I had that and I don't have it anymore. I get stuck in that of like the good old times, whatever. But yeah, so I have to remind myself, as long as I'm looking back there, I'm missing what's in front of me, what's around me. And God has called me God is all about presence. And
our mind sanitizes what people don't know. Our mind sanitizes the past. Like there's tons of studies on this. We clean up our past memories to make them even better. Have you ever been inside, have you ever had a chance to go back into your old childhood home?
Yeah. I live there.
Yeah. Like when you went back into it, like what age were you when you were in that house?
I lived there between first grade and fifth.
Okay. So when you think about that before you moved back in, you thought it was so much bigger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He sanitized them like you're a little kid. And so you have the perspective of where you were.
Yeah.
And so I remember going back into our old house and I was like, when we went back into it, I had been in it for years. And I remember thinking, this is really small. Like I remember in my mind, it was like just every room was bigger than it was, and every area, the living room, the family, everything was just bigger. And I went back into it, and I was like, this wasn't. And so you sanitize your memory of you in that past season, and I can almost guarantee, not that it wasn't a good season, but if you right now transported yourself back into that season that you were, I'm not sure you'd be happy anymore. I'm not sure you'd be satisfied with that season anymore, because who you are today is so different than who you were back in that season. Right. But we think, our mind tricks us into thinking that was the glory day. That was the best. That's what you want. But if you could honestly transport yourself and put yourself back in, and some people are able to kind of do that. They jump back into something that they were in years ago, and like it feels different. It's like, yeah, because you're a different person.
Yeah.
You're not the same person you were when you went through that season. And some seasons are temporary. They're meant to be stepping stones, building seasons to bring you to who God's called you to be.
Yeah, totally. Huh. That's really cool. I really love Moses' story, and I think it could be so like practical and relatable to what some people can be experiencing even now. Like they know that God is calling them to something and calling them to a new season, and they keep delaying it. Someone, I don't know who says this, but delayed obedience is still disobedience. And so like maybe there's someone listening right now who knows that they need to be in a new season, you know, whether that's a new job or they need to serve somewhere because they're not serving yet or whatever it is. And you're scared of what could be. Just want to encourage you right now, like God's probably asking you to step into that season for a reason. And if you don't, you may be missing out on some good things that he has planned for you. Not that it won't be hard, not that it won't be uncomfortable, not that it won't be stretching and push you and maybe even sometimes be like a little just of a hardship or a difficulty, but you may be missing out on something good that the Lord is trying to show you or have you experience or use you in a way that if you don't step into that season, you're going to miss out on something good.
Yeah.
Lauren, I feel like you're refining a thought in your mind over there.
I have a story actually on that. That exact thought. My brother actually, so he had done YWAM school with us, and so he came to Australia for 6 months. And then when I was home visiting, maybe like a year later, I was like, so, I went out to coffee with him and Audrey for some reason. We're just sitting at Starbucks, and
I mean,
was
they're
like,
your siblings.
yeah, I know. For some reason, it was so weird. No. And I remember asking, like, so what do you guys want to do next? Like, where are you at in life, And Levi was kind of like, I don't really know. Like, I'm just feeling like pretty lost and like stuck a little bit. And I was like, okay. So we like talked about Audrey, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to go to this school, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, you have your whole life planned out. And then,
By the way, Audrey's here.
We keep
yeah,
looking
just
over
staring,
at her.
like,
Looking at her.
directly
If you're
staring
just
at me.
listening via podcast, Audrey approves this message, all right?
Exactly. So then we revisit Levi, and I just had this thought to ask him, like, so Levi, like, what was the last thing you felt God asked you to do? And he's like, kind of like did this face, and he's like, actually, to do a Bible school for 9 months. And I was like, so when did he tell you that? And he's like, oh, it's been a while, I'm not gonna lie. And I was like, so why haven't you done it? And he's like, I don't know, I'm just like scared, and the whole idea of like studying and the workload and like the academic side of things really scares me. And I was like, yeah, but if you feel stuck and like you're not sure where to go, but that was the last thing that God said, maybe that's what you should do. And so he's like, okay, well, yeah, thanks, Lolo, I'm gonna pray about it. I was like, cool. Okay. I wonder what God will say. And then fast forward, this other woman at church had a dream, and she shared that with him, and it was just like, I just felt like God said, eat the word. And he's like, I need to go. And so he did this 9-month Bible school, and it completely changed and transformed his mind, but then like him as a person, how he like responds to people. He's just like a different person. And he actually met his wife there. So I'm like, dude, if you didn't go, you would not have met
almost
Katie.
missed out.
So
Like-
you missed out on
missed
your
out.
spouse.
Brother, you would be
if you
single as a
disobeyed
Pringle
the
right
Lord.
now. I'm just kidding. But just that whole idea
That's
of
lit-
like,
yeah.
if you are unsure
Yeah.
and you've asked God before and you felt like he said something, like just go with it, like obey, because I don't think that God's just like, oh, okay, yeah, you know what? Let's scrap that last thing I said and let's just go with this new thing. He knows what's best, even if it's scary to us. Like, I relate so much to Moses, but anyway, that's another story.
When I was in high school and I was graduating, I really wanted to be a special needs teacher. Like, love special needs kids, really wanted to do that. I was like, I'm going to go to COD for 3 years, and I'll do 1 year at Lewis. They have this 3+1 thing, get the certificate, or degree or whatever it was. And so I was like 2 weeks into my first semester at Community College of DuPage. And I was like 2 weeks in, and I was like, and I had this thought, and I was like, I never really asked God what I should do. I just kind of went with it. I was like, oh boy. I was like, maybe I should ask him what he wants me to do. What
Was
if
there
this
a really hard test right in front of you?
Yeah.
Like, God, I'm going to ask right now.
Yeah, I was like,
That was a good sign.
yeah, I'm like, all right. And so I spent that first half of the semester really praying, really asking God, what do you want me to do? Like, what is this? Like, if this is what you want me to do, great. I'm in it. Let's do it. You work this out in your sovereignty, in my assumption, you worked it out. But Lord, if this is not what you want me to do, then this is a scary thing to pray, right? Especially if you're set on something. What do you want me to do? I'm open. I'm here. Use me. And about halfway through that semester of praying, he made it very clear. He's like, I don't want you to do that at all. I love that you want to do that, but that's not what I want you to do. I'm actually calling you into ministry. in calling you into church specific ministry, because like you said, ministry can be done inside the church or outside the church. But he was calling me specifically to church ministry, right? In the local church. And so I said, gulp. I was like, really? It was funny because I would actually make fun of a couple of friends who went to Moody, and I'm like, you're gonna be broke the rest of your life. This like, you're not gonna like. What? Why are you going to Moody? Like, and then 2 years later, he's calling me to ministry, and of course, I'm like, you want me to apply at Moody, don't you? And he's like, yep. And so I was like, okay, well, this is from you, God. I'm gonna apply, and if you provide, and if you open the door, I'm gonna go. And so, and he did just that. And so I ended up going to Moody. The following, I finished off that first semester, finished off the second semester at at COD, and then transferred to Moody in the fall. But it was like, I could have, like, he made it very clear, and I could have ignored it. I could have been like, nah, I'm going to continue this down this where I'm already headed. And I probably wouldn't have been as content, as happy, as fulfilled as I am right now.
Yeah.
Well,
I could tell you, I did ignore it. So
the other half of the story.
I'm the other half of that. When I was 16, I went to Africa with a friend on a mission trip to Uganda, and amazing trip, life-changing trip for me. I was already a believer.
is that with Ozzy?
Yeah, with Ozzy.
Shout out Ozzy.
So yeah, shout out to Ozzy. And one of the days we were fasting, or we weren't fasting, we were praying and worshiping in a room. Like 30 of us were there. And I remember I'm kind of leaning forward in a chair. My hands are like this, and I'm just praying, just really pressing in. Lord, it's halfway probably through the trip. The night before, let me just give you a little backstory. The night before, at the top of the stairs, I remember it was nighttime. I was talking to my buddy Ozzy. He's leading the youth ministry, the lights on. And he says, bro, like, what do you think about coming back and helping me with the youth ministry? Just like helping support, co-leading it with me. And I joke and I said the Christian answer for no. I said, let me pray about it.
Pray about it.
So I had no intention of praying about it. I had no intention of, seeing if that, I was totally scared and totally afraid of that. So the next day, jump back into that room. 30 people worshiping and praying. I'm kneeling over. I'm praying, just seeking God right before lunch. And I had a vision. I'd never had a vision in my life until that point. I had a vision of me in the future a year forward. And I didn't know that at the time. I saw myself on a stage with red carpet, and there was a Soul Purpose sign behind it, and I was preaching on stage with a mic. Like, as clear as I see you now, I saw this in my mind. I wasn't asking for a vision. I wasn't, and I got it clear. Like, it was like a TV screen in my face. And the time of worship and prayer finished, they're like, all right, let's go to lunch. I'm like, as I'm walking down this dark hallway, I'll never forget it. I'm walking down this dark hallway. All I can think about is, I know exactly what God's saying, and I am not going to tell Ozzy. Like, I'm not letting anybody know this, this
God.
is secret between me and God. And so I literally sat on that. That, by the way, that picture, the way the stage was at that point, it was a skating ramp. It was all wood, and it was a skating ramp. So it looked nothing like this vision that I'd saw. It would not look like that until a year later. That stage with the red carpet and all of this, and I don't even know who designed it. So the trip finishes. I get back, a few months go by, and nothing's changed. I mean, I'm serving in ministry, but I'm not serving in the youth. I don't want to be on stage. I don't want to lead anything. I'm on the tech team. And Ozzy gets sick. And he says, hey, bro, I need you to cover for me. Would you just like lead the youth group? It's like a small group. Would you lead the small group? It's like 6-7 people. It's a Wednesday or whatever. Would you lead it, please? So I say, sure. So, I mean, I'm so nervous. My cousin drove me there. It was probably the worst small group lesson of all time.
I don't believe that.
But that's what got me in youth ministry. And then it's slowly but surely, eventually I was helping lead it. I was speaking, almost forgot about that word to some degree. Like I didn't keep coming back to that. It was kind of like, oh, that was for there. And I just kind of like moved on. And then I saw a picture like a few years later of exactly what I saw in the vision on a picture. And it like all came back like, oh, like, yeah, that was a specific vision that God gave me to.
Wow. That
played out in his timing, even though I was afraid and basically hid it. And like God continues like, nah, you're doing this, dude. Maybe Ozzy got sick Maybe God made him sick. I'm sorry, Ozzy.
Sorry, Ozzy.
So yeah, but I had so much fear. I had no desire. I didn't want to be in public ministry. I didn't want to be in a leadership position. I was super afraid of being in front of people in that capacity. I had no desire to do it. And I'm just like, okay, like I got this, but I don't have to respond to it. And God's like, no, I'm gonna keep. You're not running from this one. And that was the start of me being involved in some type of leadership.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting stuff right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Vision. Never had another vision like that into the future. But it was about that, from that moment, it was about a year into the future that everything that moment that I saw would be a reality.
Wow. Yeah. I feel like change can definitely, I like kind of tying it back to conversation about change specifically, those new seasons and kind of what happened with your brother and him asking you, or you asking him what was the last thing God called you to, can really be an introduction to a season of change. And it could be a really pivotal moment in your life where the Lord is very clearly calling you to something and calling you to another season, into a new season of change, into a new season of life. And if you don't respond to it, you remain in those feelings of feeling stuck or feeling the what if feelings, and I would hate for someone to be 5-10 years down, man, what if I had done that? What if I had responded to God and obeyed what he had said and taken him seriously? What if I would have followed and actually, answered the call of what he was calling me to do? Yes, the change would have been scary. Yes, the change would have been hard, but I guess I saw this on Instagram and it's not biblical at all, but it said choose your heart, right? Choose what you want to, what's difficult, because going to the gym is difficult and not going to the gym is difficult, right? Becoming unhealthy, saving for your future is difficult, and spending a lot of money right now isn't necessarily difficult, but there's, you're losing money, right? So choose your difficulty. You can choose to obey God and jump into a new season, and you could, follow him and respond to the call. And that's going to be difficult. Or you could, stay in the same season that you're in and remain in those feelings of feeling man, what if, or I'm stuck, or and that's difficult too, So it's choose your difficulty. Which one? I would rather be in the difficulty of a new season than feeling like I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Personally.
Definitely. Any last thoughts, Zach, before we wrap up?
Just want of encouragement to, if you're navigating change now, if you're not right now, you will.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Yep.
Just like a summary of what we've said,
Yeah.
right? It's acknowledge the pain of the loss that comes through change.
Yeah.
No matter how small, no matter how big, be honest with yourself. Stay connected to the Lord. Trust. I think it's all about faith and trust. Trust that the Lord will bring you into something beautiful.
Yeah.
He's not going to the landing place. The thing that God promises is, in the end, everything will be good and beautiful. So even if you have to go through difficult seasons to get there, keep trusting in the Lord. There's actually, I don't listen to Lauren Daigle, but she just came out with an album I listened. I was curious about it. I listened to it.
Sure you don't.
He's a big fan.
No, I listen to hardcore heavy metal.
Oh my gosh.
Just kidding. But in that one listen through,
First listen through.
she has a song at the end that's just chanting if it's not good, then it's not over. If it's not good, then it's, and that phrase just has stuck with me. And I think it's one that if you can bring anything to the bank and just anchor something on it, it's that phrase. If it's not good, then it's not over. Because God is bringing all things to a place that's beautiful and good and making all things new.
Yeah.
So if you are connected to the Lord, if your faith is in the Lord, then you can trust. If it's not good yet, then it's not over, and there will be good change that comes. So trust in the Lord to bring you to something beautiful. Have community, stay in community, and make sure you have a foundation that you can then build upon as you navigate this change. And go.
Go. Yeah.
Go. Embrace it and
Embrace
do
it.
it. Do that
Do
thing
it.
that you've been hesitating to do that you feel like the Lord is calling you to, even though it's going to be difficult and challenging and hard, because God's got something good for you
Yeah.
Yeah.
in it.
Nice. Well, I just want to say one last thing. If there is anyone who is listening who feels like, man, I am wanting to navigate change, but I'm not sure if I really hear God's voice, I just want to say you do. Like, that is a lie from hell that you don't hear God's voice. And he is speaking to you. It's just a matter of recognizing it. So if you have questions about, recognizing God's voice, talk to your mentor, talk to your one-on-one, talk to a leader, and ask questions, because that is a huge part of doing life with Jesus. And so just as a note, you do hear God's voice. He is there. He is with you. And hopefully today's episode kind of helps you have some deeper thoughts about change and how to navigate it, and also hear some inspiring stories, or not so inspiring stories on my part, about change. So until next time, Sippin' Saints are out.
Keep on sipping.
Keep on sipping.